And welcome into the Four Verticals Podcast, episode 171 for March 26, 2026. Hi, top course, a beautiful Jacksonville, Florida, warming up Jacksonville, Florida, Chamber of Commerce today, if you will. Beautiful outside. I went for my run earlier. Nice, not too cold, not too hot. Temperatures in the 70s, so not too bad. Definitely a lot better than what we were doing, how we were doing earlier in the week. It was pretty cool out. And so that's very good as well. The weather's been fine as usual at this time of the year. Of course, as we get into the summer here in the southeast, of course, here in Florida, it gets really warm and really moist out there in terms of the humidity. Right now, it's not too bad. But anyway, of course, I have a loaded show for you guys today, as usual. Got a SEC win total, as you can tell by the title. Yes, they've been out for a little bit. Haven't covered them yet. We'll do them here. So we'll give you guys where I'm leaning towards all the teams. We won't cover all of them in detail. We'll go through most of the ones that are probably important in detail, and some we'll just briefly talk about. Of course, we have reasonable expectations. Ohio State on deck here for that segment. We'll wrap up the show with college football historical what ifs, right? Got three more. So if you are new here to the show, first of all, welcome to the show. I hope you guys are, if you're returning viewers, new viewers, hopefully you guys are subscribed. If number one, make sure you do that. Unfortunately, a lot of folks who probably watch this show are not subscribed. We want you to. We want you to be subscribed. It's the button somewhere down there on the bottom there. Click it. Don't need notifications on if you want to. I don't personally do that for stuff I like to watch, shows and whatnot. Be sure to follow us on the socials, X, Twitter, Instagram, over there. And then also on the podcast feed as well. For Verticals, just search that on the Spotify feed, and you'll be able to find it over there as well. So different ways you can watch this show. Anyway, so again, a lot of things to discover here. Let's get into it. Again, tomorrow we'll have our extra pod. Tomorrow we'll be recording those. And next week, a little bit of a housekeeping here in terms of the future schedule. We may not be, so I know for sure we will not have a show Thursday, probably. A typical show Thursday, nor will we do an extra pod probably on Friday. Again, I mentioned this on the show Tuesday. My apartment, the apartment complex I live here, as per usual, I'm sure for most places, they do this like yearly emergency system testing for all the units and all the buildings here. So because of all of that during operational hours, right, during the day when we do our show, obviously we can't really do a show traditionally. So the plan is, if that's happening next week, even with the schedule changes already, we might just have to do shows in the evening, right? So probably a shows at night, probably early in the week, and then we'll see. But even without that being the case, now my apartment has not emailed me yet as to who they're doing. Now it's supposed to be this week, but they have to cancel it. So I'm assuming it's probably for the next couple of weeks, or next week or the week after. So yeah, the schedule either way is really, really weird again. So next week for sure, no show Thursday probably, no extra pod Friday. So tentatively we'll do a show Monday and Wednesday, okay? So the Monday and Wednesday, and if the apartment does the emergency testing for the apartment, then of course we'll have the shows instead of during the day. We'll have them at night, I guess. So in the evening. So again, the schedule gets a little weird next week. Apologies for that, more than likely, but that's how it's going to be. It was like this, I think, last year or two. We had some weird scheduling quirks during the time of the year. So it's not totally, normal right now, but trust me, we'll get back to normal soon. But yes, there will be an extra pod tomorrow for sure. We'll do that, have that recorded in the afternoon, probably around this time, probably. Okay, here. Anything else you need to go over here? Make sure the microphone's on. It is on. Okay, good. All right. SEC win totals. These have been out for a while on FanDuel. That's the site we're using. It was not a sponsor of the show, just a resource we use for this information. You could use any of these betting sites, but we prefer to use FanDuel, like a lot of our folks. Not a sponsor of the show, again, just a asset we use. So we're going over SEC win totals. Again, we're not going over every single team's schedule and, doing all of that. We'll just go over the big ones for sure, like the bigger programs, and smaller programs like using the words of Bud Elliott, take the checks, take the losses programs like Arkansas, for example. We'll touch on them briefly, and we'll touch on them a whole lot. So first up here, Bama. We're going in alphabetical order here. This is how FanDuel has it set up. Alphabetical order here. Alabama. Win total over-under is 8.5. Let's go to their schedule here. Again, they're one of the bigger programs, so first we'll take a look at it. It's been released for a while. So their schedule here, as I look at it here on the set I'm using. So they play a G5 team. They have Kentucky on the road, Florida State, South Carolina, Mississippi State on the road. Those are the two other games I mentioned were at home. Georgia at home, Tennessee on the road, A&M at home, LSU on the road, Vanderbilt on the road, FCS and Auburn at home. The thinking is here, and this is just to say this out loud for those of you who don't know. In the SEC, when it comes to their win totals, no team is at 10. There's no double-digit totals for the win totals here. Everyone's in single digits here. So just to get that out, put that out there. If you haven't noticed already, if you haven't looked at it. For Bama, I think 8.5 is probably the good baseline, but I would be leaning over. I feel pretty good about Bama this year. I know that's kind of, I said that last year and I said the year before. Look, I know there's a lot of pressure with Kellen DeBoer, and a lot of folks aren't happy with him. Look, I get that. It's not been the smoothest of transitions based on what you were dealing with before, right? With the greatest head coach, at least in the modern era of college football. I understand that. But he's not, unless they go, 7-5, 6-6. I don't think he's getting fired. I think there's definitely a lot of competitive pressure. It's sort of like what happened with Kirby and Ryan Day, and sort of kind of what happened with Jimbo Fisher, and then it became actual real hot seat talk towards the end. So I think Kalen, look, if they go even 8-4, I think that is definitely, that's www.wearescrewed.com. But based on the schedule, I mean, at the very beginning, before the Georgia game, they should be undefeated. I think they should be favored in all those games. So Kentucky, obviously, you should be double-digit favorites in that. Florida State, ditto. You probably will be significant favorites. South Carolina, same thing. Mississippi State on the road, same. And then reality hits you, right? You have Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, LSU. I know there's a bye week in between the A&M and LSU game, but still, there's all those games are in a row, and I think I said this back in January and February. That's probably the toughest stretch in the conference, I think. I don't think there's anyone else that's really come close to that. So that is a tough stretch after starting with Georgia, going to LSU, and then you have like Vanderbilt and FCS team at Auburn. So you should be okay through September. You should be undefeated. You should beat Mississippi State. I'd imagine you should be major, huge favorites in all those games. And then reality hits you pretty quickly with Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, LSU. So based on, yes, the schedule is definitely difficult, obviously. But the thing is, though, with Bama, I think defensively they should be fine. Offensively, whoever the starter is, right, whether it's Keelan Russell or Austin Mack, I think you should feel fairly good about who the quarterback's going to be. You got to make sure you have to run the football. That's a chronic issue last year, and it's been mainly basically a systemic issue since they've been there. The new staff's been there, which is odd because Kalen DeBoer, contrary to popular belief, he's not an air raid offensive-minded coach. He's actually it's kind of the same thing people think about, or the same way people view the Baylor Bryles stuff. It's not an air raid system. It's more of a power run. And then you do a lot of throwing off of that. It's more of a run first, then passes, not a total air raid, right? That's a lot of folks still. I think to this day get confused with Alabama and Kalen DeBoer. They're not a team that's going to throw it 40 times per game. They can do that, but that's not what they want to do. And I don't think that's their MO at all. And I think they want to emphasize running the football. So hopefully if they can do that, I know they've changed over the offensive line coach, and so we'll see about that. I think in this case, if I were which I would lean if I were a betting man, which I don't actually bet personally for different reasons. Look, I don't nothing against betting, but if I were just betting on paper, not actually putting money on it, I would lean over with this 9.5. I think there was just a way here with several games here. The Georgia game, obviously Georgia has a Bama problem, especially in the regular season, especially in Tuscaloosa. You have Tennessee, which, you might be, in terms of the betting wise, you might be a slight favorite in that game. I know some folks think you'll be a dog in that game, which I don't think you will. A&M and LSU, LSU does scare me on the road. That really does scare me. A&M, we'll see. I'm not the. We'll obviously get to these teams eventually, but I just think there is a way where Bama could be 9-3 or better. So I would definitely take the over on that. I'll lean over. Arkansas, 4.5 here. I'll lean the under. It's a new staff there, Ryan Silverfield. Nothing against Ryan Silverfield. He might be a good coach. In the words of Tom Fornelli, good hire for Arkansas. I know it's going to work out. Even after, of course, he is part of the Mike Norvell coaching tree, right? He was a coach under Norvell. He was, I think, his offensive coordinator when he was at Memphis. And so he inherited that program from him. Memphis is one of those programs in the G5 and the lower, like the mid-major schools in college football that they do have a lot of serious money. FedEx pumps in a lot of NIL money. They have a lot of rich people who live there, obviously, for the most part. So they have good resources like them, UCF formerly, like South Florida. Those are like the bigger spenders in NIL. Them and I believe Liberty of all places. So even there, when Ryan was the coach there, he didn't really eclipse even what Mike Norvell and even Justin Fuente did. It was nothing really. He didn't really get close to that level of consistency. And now he's walking to Arkansas, where, again, in the words of Bud Elliott, they are one of the teams where it's take the checks, take the losses, just be thankful. You have the right sticker on your helmet. You're getting a lot of money. Of course, everyone loves money. So, it's a program that's under-resourced as hell. They do not really focus on college, but they don't spend money. They mainly spend on like basketball, right? That's why Arkansas is moving on in the NCAA tournament. They spend on baseball and track and field and softball and all these like non-football or non-major revenue-driving sports. Look, I understand there's you can do that, but we also have to take the grips of reality that college football is the money generator. They're the one that's the engine that's making a lot of money when that's making the revenue for the athletic department. And unfortunately, Arkansas, they for some reason do not at least try to even delegate resources to it. Like, again, you've seen it in basketball, you've seen it in both women's and I believe men's basketball, you've seen it in the track and field and baseball. They can do that for that, right? You have the Tyson Foods guy and the Waltons and whatnot. But for football, it's like they can't even lift a finger on that. It's very weird and it's very bizarre. Even though, yes, Arkansas, even if they were pumping in money, that's not like they're going to get, how much success can you have there, right? But I think 4.5 here, I think that's probably right. I would actually lean under on that. Their schedule is very hard at the beginning, but it does kind of actually level off a little bit, especially with some of these teams where you don't know what their mindset will be, like your South Carolinas and your Auburns of the world. So speaking of them, we'll move on to Auburn here. We'll actually do a schedule here. It's one of the bigger brands here, right? One of the bigger focused teams that focus teams in the conference, right? So Auburn's schedule here. Well, first of all, their win total is 6.5. So there's that. So Vegas is expecting they should make a bowl game for the first time in a couple of years, right? So they're went over this last week, I believe. We had them we did them during the most reasonable or the reasonable expectations segment, right? So if you don't remember their schedule, it's Baylor, originally a home game, but it's the neutral site game in Atlanta. You have Baylor, G5, then you have Florida at home. Then you get Vanderbilt at home. Then you finally go on the road to an actual opponent. You play Tennessee for the first time. Actually, is this the first time in like over 10 years? That's crazy. They're playing Tennessee. Technically it's been 6 years that they play them at home during 2020, but the last time they played Tennessee on the road, I was in middle school. That's about how long ago it's been. That's just crazy to me. So on the road to Tennessee, they're going to be dogging that game for sure, probably a double-digit dog. Ditto with Georgia. LSU, probably a touchdown dog. Ole Miss, I know some folks have talked about Ole Miss will be probably favoring that game. Probably like a touchdown favorite, which sure, maybe, but that one I would imagine the spread's probably a bit shorter, I'd imagine. I don't think it's that huge, unlike what I would imagine the Georgia and Tennessee spreads would probably be. So Ole Miss, definitely I would expect that'll still be Ole Miss be the favorite, but definitely a little bit shorter spread. Arkansas, Auburn used to be favored over them. Mississippi State, same thing. Stanford, FCS team, Bama, you'll probably double-digit dogs in that game. So you do the math there, considering it's a new staff, you bring in, a new quarterback who is an upgrade, by the way, over what you've been doing with the crap you've been dealing with over the past 5 years. However, and look, again, I know I will say this and I'll be labeled as an Auburn hater and Joel, you're just a troll. I'm not, okay? I'm trying to be a realist here, right? Now, as we say on this show, we divvy up the factfulness on the show. Well, all that can be true, right? You're washing away the Hugh Freeze era. You're bringing in an offense that is, yes, I am a fan of, by the way. Another thing, too, I'm a fan of. It's very easy to install. It's easy to learn. Even though a lot of folks don't actually have access to learning it. Here's the problem. You lost a lot of talent, no doubt. But whether it's guys graduating or the portal, right? Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, that receiver room, along with a few others who were a part of that, what was it, the Freeze 5 or Freeze 4? They're all gone. Like, they're not there anymore. And that is, again, a lot of folks say, oh, you're just a troll and an idiot for saying that, oh, Auburn, losing those guys, even though there may have been some locker room issues. I understand that, okay? That's fine. Look, these guys, Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton, they could have been clowns behind the scenes. That's totally true. But their talent, especially Cam Coleman, probably will be a first-round draft pick. I don't imagine. I know a lot of folks, again, will also push back on that. But losing those guys, and that hurts. There's no doubt that's going to hurt. And that's also going to take down their blue chip ratio when Bud puts out the list in the summer. So that is, I am not going to sugarcoat the fact that they have lost talent for sure. And I think that's what his number, it's a little bit lower than it would have been if they kept those guys. I think it would have been closer to around 8.5. But because, again, you lost that talent, again, look, I understand there might be some issues behind the scenes. They're still losing talent, right? You're losing very, very high potential players, especially a guy who was, up there with Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith in that recruiting class a couple years ago. He was up there, Cam Coleman, right? Now he's at Texas now. So, again, I love the offense. I like Alex Glush as the hire. Again, I know a lot of folks saying I'm a hater. I'm not a hater. Okay, I like the hire, but it's just you're losing talent. It's you're bringing in G5 talent again. It might be actually good. Go look at what Coach Sig has done in Indiana. That's not a guarantee. Like, no one's guaranteeing anything. So Auburn 6.5. I'm going to go slightly over, but not too confident in that one. So there is that. Now, speaking of one of Auburn's opponents, Florida, they're up next year. So let's talk about Florida. Again, we'll talk about all these teams more ad nauseum. Of course, I'll probably end up repeating all this stuff during the summer. But Florida, much like Auburn, they hire a new coach, John Sturmwell. I believe Josh Page just interviewed him, actually. I haven't watched that interview yet. I'll probably do so later this week. So we have Sturmwell there. You bring in a new offensive coordinator, Buster Faulkner. You have all these new players coming in. You have new quarterbacks coming in. You retain some players with guys like Jaden Ball and Dallas Wilson, who could have easily gone elsewhere. You bring in the aforementioned Eric Singleton from Auburn and Georgia Tech, who Faulkner is very familiar with, obviously. I think Florida, and again, I know it's going to sound like, oh, you're going to fall for it again, Ward. I think Florida, based on everything I'm hearing, I mean, now again, there's injuries aside here, a long ways to go. Based on the fact that you've retained a good amount of talent, you have a coaching staff who I think is fairly competent, unlike what you had before. I think Florida, based on the schedule, it's not a very daunting schedule. It's I think I even said this back in February and January. It's a very friendly schedule. So you have we'll just go through it here if you haven't read it yet, or we haven't looked at it yet. It's G5 team, regional Florida Atlantic. You have your the Campbell coming to town, the FCS team. I think they're actually Division 3, I believe, or something, but it used to be. So you have the Campbells coming to town in Campbell. Again, that's not a college football video game team builder team. That's a real team, by the way. They have to go on the road to Auburn. That's going to be your biggest test up until the Texas game, I think. I think the Auburn game, you'll probably be a small favorite. If not, it'll be a pick 'em. Ole Miss will be a favorite. Missouri, favorite probably. South Carolina, obviously a favorite. And then you get to the Texas game, and then in Georgia and Atlanta, because the Jag Stadium here in Jacksonville, it's under construction. So it's a neutral site still, but it's in different locations now for a couple of years. And you have OU coming to town, and then levels off a little bit of a Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Florida State, which who knows, could be an interim coach there in Tallahassee more than likely. So again, it's a very friendly schedule. I know a lot of folks, again, will sound like, will say, oh, you're fault for it. You're fault for it again. Well, I hope not. So look, if I do, sure, I fell for it again. I think if they just get quarterback right, whether it's Aaron Philo or the other transfer they got in, which I'm assuming would be Aaron Philo, but it's not a guarantee, right? I mean, just because Buster Faulkner knows who he is and whatnot doesn't guarantee he'll be the starter. I'm assuming he'll be the starter, given the fact, and they have kept around a lot of decent talent. Summerall, who I have a lot of respect for. Based on, again, the schedule is very friendly. I think Florida is probably going to be dogs in 3 games probably. So again, they're all there are in the road here, right? Texas is probably going to be a dog. Georgia, probably a dog. Oklahoma, slight dog. The only other game besides those 3 I just mentioned is probably Auburn. But that one to me is more of a pick 'em. I just frankly believe both of these teams are very similar to each other. It's just unfortunately Florida has more talent than Auburn right now. If I had to imagine, once the blue chip ratio comes out from Bud Elliott, I would expect Florida to be still fairly high up there, and I think Auburn's probably bumped down a little bit. Again, it's not me dissing on Auburn. It's just I'm being a realist here. Okay, I'm just divvying up the facts from this year. So, based on again the friendly schedule, the retaining of decent talent, the new coaching staff there, actually getting a legit offensive coordinator instead of what you have been dealing with for the last 4 years, I think Florida could easily go over this win total of 6.5. Same as Auburn. So I'm going to go over, leaning over. Next up here, Georgia. Just to really get out of the way here, they're like them and Texas are 9.5, and they're the highest ones in the conference. Georgia, I have no lean at all. I think that's pretty reasonable. Yes, it's a tough schedule reasonably. I mean, your non-con, besides Georgia Tech, it's okay. You get an FCS team and then your G5. Yeah, you have Arkansas. So your toughest games on the schedule here are what? Oklahoma, first time going to Athens, I think, ever, which is kind of crazy. I believe, wasn't that supposed to happen a couple of years ago? And when they were when Oklahoma was back in the Big 12, I think it was, and they canceled it for some reason, which makes no sense at all because Bama didn't cancel their series of Texas, even though Texas was going to leaving the Big 12 to join the SEC, whatever, odd scheduling quirk. So OU's coming to town. You have Bama on the road. You have Florida and Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz. It's basically a home game for Georgia, even though they technically should be, but whatever. Then you have that's it. So yeah, Florida, Bama, and Oklahoma. So that's what 9-3 probably. If I had to do an early best case scenario, probably the 3 games if you're ever a Georgia fan, you'd be worried about. Trying to look here, is Tennessee on the schedule? It's not. Tennessee's not on the schedule. I just realized that. That is crazy. No Tennessee. Very, very bizarre. I've never seen a schedule for Georgia to not include Tennessee. So, hey, if you're Tennessee, golf clap. I just realized that. I totally forgot that there was no Tennessee on the schedule for Georgia. So, yeah, their 3 toughest games are UF, Bama, and Oklahoma. So I think the 9.5, no lean, I think that's probably fine. Kentucky, 4.5 win total here. New staff there with Will Stein. You have a bunch of transfer portal guys coming in. You're sort of reshaping the roster. There is a possibility, very small as it is, this could work, right? This could work out, or it could be a total disaster. I know a lot of folks are saying, hey, Kentucky is still North Indiana, basketball power. Maybe they can, finally step up in football and do so consistently, even though the coach you just fired was doing so kind of a good job of doing that. Anyway, a small chance of that happening, very unlikely. I think, though I will say that with Will Stein, I have a lot of respect for the guy. He's a very, very well-shaped offensive coordinator, very sharp from all the things I've heard. Though I will say Kentucky, from a scheduling standpoint, it's a tough schedule. I mean, you're, again, much like Arkansas and South Carolina, you're one of the teams to take the checks and take the losses, right? That's just how it works. Even despite the fact you get Kenny Minchie, formerly of Notre Dame, at one point with Nebraska for a couple of hours. You do, again, you get some decent players in the portal, right? You get C.J. Baxter from Texas. You get Nick Anderson from LSU. They did transfer in. So that is, good, right? That sounds good. Your non-con, as per usual, again, you schedule it to basically have it be very, very much so winnable games. 2 of them, you have South Alabama and Youngstown State, FCS. Then you have the rest of your schedule. You have Bama, Texas A&M, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Florida, Missouri, and then Louisville, the other non-con, to wrap up the year in the rivalry game. So even though I think their transfer portal class is, it's okay. It's fine, right? It's not bump microphone there on Spotify. That's not bad. It's okay. The schedule is very tough. So even with the tough schedule, even with all of that, I think there's a slight chance here that Kentucky could potentially go slightly over. I don't know. There's might be a small potential they can do that. Mainly, this is probably me having a little bit too much faith in Will Stein, but we'll see. I'll slightly lean over here, maybe by a win. So maybe 6-6, maybe. If they can steal some wins, like over, for example, South Carolina would be a good one. Vanderbilt, obviously. Missouri, Florida, for example. If things go, going down the wrong direction, who knows? They have Louisville even. So Kentucky leaning slightly over, but again, that's more of having faith in Will Stein. but who knows? I could be totally wrong on that. Much like all of these. Next one here, LSU 8.5. I'm just telling you now, I'm leaning over. Love the higher Lane Kiffin. I know it was very, very odd circumstances, whatever. It's over with. It's history. It's on a, we'll move on. Schedule. Yes, it's difficult. It's not easy, right? You have Clemson. You have to, the Lane's return to Ole Miss, to Oxford. You have Texas A&M. It was, I'm sure you'll be looking for revenge on them, right? It's literally the scene of the crime from last year. And then it levels out a little bit. You get your FCS team, Kentucky, Mississippi State. You should take care of those. Auburn, same thing. I don't think you should have much problem with them. Bama at home's good. Texas at home, good. Tennessee on the road, don't like. Though, again, since it's later in the year, it's one of those vibe teams. You never know what they could be. Same of Arkansas. So there's some bumpy parts of it, but there's also parts of where it's like, okay, this, they could go on the roll here. I think going over is reasonable. I think with you're bringing in a whole new, you're leveling up already of quarterback. You're bringing in Sam Levitt. If he's healthy, that's one thing to consider here. If he's fully healthy, then this team could easily go over. If he's not, then I'll have more caution here. So far, so good, right? We haven't heard anything really, really alarming about that. From that, you also retain Mr. Blake Baker, very good defensive coordinator. So he's back again. He's been retained. So yeah, I think Ole Miss. I think 8.5. If you can go over that, definitely feel good about that. Mississippi State up next year, 4.5. I'm leaning under. Again, they're an under-resourced program, and look, I know there's Mississippi State fans that are out there, Brandon Walker and whatnot. I get that. You guys do exist, but again, for being real, let's be real. I mean, you guys are not a team that I would, think that could make a bowl game. Their schedule, and they have to go to Minnesota. Week 2, that's going to be difficult on the road, hostile environment. You play in a row here, and it's not actually in a row, but they're all, at least in terms of your schedule, it's you have Bama, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas. I know there's a bye week in between the Bama and LSU games, but still, I mean that's a tough stretch there. Definitely very very similar to what Bama's got to go through. And then you have Vanderbilt, Auburn, FCS team, and Ole Miss. Now, we'll pay your, get your attention to this South Carolina game, Mississippi State. Probably, and I do agree with Bud Elliott. He mentioned this, I believe, on Tuesdays or Mondays Cover 3 show. Yeah, it was on Monday. That South Carolina, Mississippi State could be a low-key hot seat bowl, potentially the stinker of the year. I mean, that's sort of giving me some, I'm not saying this will happen or not, but it's sort of giving me already the vibes of Mississippi State and Mississippi State and Arkansas back in 2022, I believe. Yeah, 2022. Kind of the same vibes. I just, I think the final score was 7-6 or whatever. Like very, very low scoring game. Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. Mississippi State, yeah, definitely I would go under here. Let's see here, Missouri. I'm actually not leaving here. I'm leaning under. They're still a good team. I have a lot of respect for Eli Drinkwitz. However, I mean, you're bringing Chip Lindsey, who I'm not a fan of as offensive coordinator. Your schedule, it's workable a little bit, but there are some bumpy stretches here, of course. You have your Florida, and in a stretch here, it's in October, I believe. All of October pretty much is somewhat difficult. You have Florida, A&M, and Ole Miss, and you have a gap with Arkansas in between. Then you get Texas, Georgia. Then you have Kentucky and then Oklahoma. So I'm going to go probably under on that one, I guess. I'm not really sure what you expect of Missouri. I'll just say that. I just don't know. No, I'm not really sure. Easily, I could have probably just said no lean, but I'll probably just say lean under. I could change my mind on that. Oklahoma, 7.5 here. I'm going to lean over. I think Oklahoma should be about where they were last year. Again, second year under Ben Arbuckle with his buddy at quarterback there with what's his name? Totally forgot his name. I should know this. John Mateer, yeah. It's a lot of total mind fart. So yeah, John Mateer, second year. Ben Arbuckle, second year. Look, the Michigan game, that's scary. It's on the road. You get Georgia as, again, Michigan and Georgia as your two major conference opponents. Good luck with that. Actually, your first three major opponents are Michigan, Georgia, and Texas. have fun. Potentially, worst case scenario, 2-3 start, which would be very, very bizarre. Moves off a little bit with like Kentucky, Mississippi State, and then South Carolina. Then after that, it's like Florida, and then A&M is probably your toughest games, probably in your schedule. Because even with that, I think you definitely get some of those games. Like you could probably beat Michigan. You could potentially beat Texas again. You could probably beat like Florida and Ole Miss and A&M probably at home. So lean here over. Again, I have a lot of faith with Mateer being back and Ben Arbuckle. I think that's the key here as long as he's healthy. Ole Miss, 7.5, no lean here. Even with the schedule, Trinidad being back helps. Now, if he didn't come back, I would say lean under. I think that would be definitely a case where I would not be confident with Ole Miss being even just reasonably good. But with him being back, 7.5, probably okay. I have no problem with that. Next one here, South Carolina, 6.5, no. Under. This team, to me, even with the injuries and stuff, which is weird, South Carolina, if you have been paying attention, they did all this work in the transfer portal, right? They bring in, I believe, new offensive linemen. One of them's out with like an ACL tear, I believe, so he's done for the year. One's maybe should be back. The schedule is tough. Again, you have that Mississippi State game early. That could be sort of your, like, I don't know, use whatever term you want to use, hot seat bowl, stinker of the year, decide my fate bowl. Look, I like Shane Beamer as a coach. I never met him before. He seems like a good man. It seems like he's not an idiot, right? I think he knows what he's doing. But again, much like Kentucky and South Carolina, it's South Carolina's in that, but along with Mississippi State and Arkansas, Kentucky, it's again South Carolina is one of those programs where they take the check, take the losses. Right, someone has to accumulate the losses, and unfortunately, South Carolina could be that. Even with Lenora Sellers coming back, I just have this like them and Florida State this year are two teams that feel to me are dead on arrival. They just feel flat. Is all I can basically say, and it's unfortunate. Because again, I like Shane Beamer. I think Shane Beamer, someone is a competent head coach. He's not an idiot. From all I can tell, he seems like a good guy. But as they say, college football is not a fairy tale world, and this schedule is very tough. And you are going to be dogs in most of these games, right? I mean, just go through it. Bama, probably double-digit dog. Mississippi State, probably a pick 'em. Kentucky, probably barely a favorite. Florida, probably a dog. Obviously, you'll be a dog against Tennessee. Oklahoma, dog. Texas A&M, dog. Arkansas, maybe a slight favorite. Georgia, massive dog. Clemson, definitely be a dog on the road, even though I'm not very high on Clemson. Clemson's still better than you, right? So I can definitely see this spiraling out of control. I think even once you get to like your A&M game and your games against Arkansas and Georgia, you probably, sadly, probably have an interim coach at that point. Again, I have no joy in saying that, but yeah, I mean, it's tough. And again, as much as I like Shane Beamer, as much as I actually like Lenora Sellers, it's just the injuries on top of the schedule and the vibes, and the fact that with a lot of these programs, like again, the take the checks, take the losses programs, as Bud says, the whole idea is, look, you have to restart the hype cycle every so often. The hype cycle with Mark Stoops right now, the hype cycle with all these other coaches, all these like smaller programs, it eventually expires. It's going to expire probably more than likely on Shane Beamer. So look, I have no joy. Again, I have no joy in saying that with anyone, whether it's Hugh Freeze last year or Sam Pittman. It's just that's how this works. You have to restart the hype cycle. You have to get people excited. You have to keep folks invested. You have to get people in the people excited about the future. And unfortunately, with Shane Beamer, it's going to probably end up with him losing his job and they'll move on to someone else. Even despite the fact that they have, I think, a fairly decent college quarterback in Lenora Sellers. It's unfortunate he's on a big, crappy team. And he could go anywhere too, man. And it's, hats off to him for being loyal, being a loyal soldier, and actually sticking around. But I'll just tell you this. I know it's not been reported out there officially, but I'll just say this. I can guarantee you, with all my heart, that Lenora Sellers definitely had looks elsewhere. Definitely, I think Miami was in the mix. I think Tennessee was probably in the mix. Auburn probably was in the mix for him. He could have gone anywhere, man. But he's, a loyal soldier, and I give him credit for that. He's a loyal soldier, wants to, try to do this again. And look, there were moments last year where they showed competency, right? They had A&M on the ropes. They were up 31-0, and the lead was blown. They were competitive with Bama. They blown that lead. And it's tough. It's just a reality. Take the checks, take the losses, as they say. Moving on here, Tennessee, 7.5, no lean. look, again, they avoid Georgia. Good. They unfortunately get Texas and Auburn and Alabama, Texas A&M, LSU. So that's what, like five or so games that are threatening. Actual Auburn probably not. So it's like 4 probably. Maybe again, if things don't go well and go well particularly, you could see them kind of. I'm not saying on quit watch, but kind of leveling out a little bit. Not to mention you lose Joey Aguilar, you try to get him back for another year, you don't. You have to start a new kid, whether it's was it McIntyre, I believe, or whatever his name is, or the other quarterbacks they have. Again, luckily with the veer and shoot, Baylor Brile stuff, it's easy to learn. You don't need a superstar quarterback. So with that in mind, that's why I didn't go under. But knowing that you're losing talent, especially at quarterback, the schedule is somewhat difficult. Even in the non-con, it's like Georgia Tech. This year's Georgia Tech team, not really afraid of it now. If it was last year's Georgia Tech, I would be scared. But this year, not so much. I think you should be fine there. I think there's no lean here. I think 7 wins, probably fine. That's okay. It's fine. It's all good. Texas, 9.5, no lean. I think they're probably the best team in the conference. They're the team that, again, I expect them to probably be the number 1 team in the country. More likely, they bring in Will Muschamp as the defensive coordinator for the first time in over a decade. Remember, kids, he was there before. Your non-con is tough with Ohio State, but it's at home. You have a lot of talent again. You've spent a whole lot in the transfer portal. You've done well in recruiting, yada, yada, yada. I just saw a lot of blind faith in Sark. I think they can get this done. I think they can make a serious push here to potentially be a championship caliber team, especially now with another year with Arch Manning under the helm. I just think that there's a lot of potential here. And I feel if I were a Texas fan, obviously, I'd be very, very excited. And then after Texas here, we have A&M, 8.5. No lean, that's probably right. Though, and there's a lot of talk about, hey, is A&M, they're downtrending, or are people starting to sell their stock on them after, even with last year's success, there's some limitations, especially with Marcel Reed. I don't know. I mean, sure, there probably is some truth to that. Yes, Marcel Reed. Well, I don't have a lot of issues with him. I think he's a good dual threat quarterback. Is he a guy who will be like a high draft pick? No. He'll probably be like a late round free agent, probably. But I'd like to say he'll get any better. I don't think so, but who knows? I mean, their schedule, look, it's a lot of tough games, right? LSU. Yeah, Bama. Though it does say it's not too bad to begin. You have Arizona State at home. I mean, if it was on the road, a little bit scared there, but it is on the road, so I feel a little bit better about that. You have LSU on the road. You have Bama on the road. You have Tennessee at home, Oklahoma, and Texas. So, that's what, like 5 games or so you'll probably be, dogs in or very short favorites in. So. But again, I have a lot of faith in Mike Elko, so who knows? Who knows what happens? I will say, though, you do end up losing Colin Klein. He's the head coach of Kansas State now. If the offense stayed the same, is it going to get worse? Who knows? They're kind of in the same boat as Georgia Tech is, right? With losing Buster Faulkner. You never know. Things will get worse, right? And then finally, Vanderbilt, 6.5. I'm probably leaning under. Lose a lot of talent. Look, I like Harkley. You have the 5-star kid coming in. We'll see. I think for Vanderbilt, from going from 10 wins to like barely 6 wins, that's fine. I don't think anyone's going to shed a tear if they, barely make it to a bowl game. That's good for Vanderbilt, right? It's not bad. That's just separate. They like a national championship. Sarcasm, I know, but still, it is Vanderbilt. You have to look at the history. You have to look at the historical data suggest. 6 wins, 7 wins. That's, good. It's good. Not bad. Good. All right, moving right along here. Get some water real quick. We'll move on to reasonable expectations. We'll move on to what ifs, college football what ifs. We'll move on. Again, as we are deep into the show here, again, welcome in. Hopefully, guys, stick around, subscribe, follow us on the socials and whatnot. Let's see here, checking around on the socials here. See if there's any news regarding college football. I think so. Actually, I forgot to mention this on the show Tuesday or on Monday, or Tuesday when we did it. That the breaking news regarding the Buccaneers, of course, Is Levante David retiring? I'll give more thoughts on that tomorrow on the extra pod. There's a question regarding that, but yes, that's for those of you who are wondering what I was referring to. I was referring to him retiring, which is spoiler, no surprise, right? But more thoughts on that tomorrow on the extra pod. There's actually someone asked a question about that, so we'll get into that then. Okay, reasonable expectations here. We've been doing this for the past month or so. Ohio State's on deck here. If any reasonable expectation here for them, pretty simple. National championship. Now, I know that sounds easy to say and whatnot, cliche, right? But, there's some hurdles here to look at, particularly the staff, right? You have a new offensive coordinator. Now, grant you, I have my qualms with Ryan, not Ryan, I have no problems with him. I have, some hesitation about Arthur Smith. If I were, even not even an Ohio State fan, just a generic fan, there's some qualms there for sure. I'm not, as a Bucks fan, I've watched him up close, literally. Well, not actually, but I've watched him. I've watched his teams a whole lot over the past few years when he was the head coach of the Falcons, right? And not really impressed with his offense at all. Very, very generic. And so there's some questions there. Will this be a marriage, sort of like a Chip Kelly? Is it going to be Ryan Day's offense? But, Arthur Smith can, just help out, get these guys ready for the professional, for the professional game, yada, yada, yada. Maybe it's just a resume builder. Could potentially be that. But with Ohio State, the expectations of being national title or bust, well, it's that. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that necessarily, but definitely national title, playoff, any of those, of course, yes, you would want. I think that's positive there, or at least that, not positive, but it's definitely, it's reasonable. Of course, that's the title of the segment, right? It's you are not stupid for thinking that. I mean, your schedule, if you look at it here, going through it again, if the coaching staff changes, yes, that is a factor, and yes, that is something I'm looking into. Not looking into, but paying attention to. It's a very interesting schedule. Of course, you get Michigan, as per usual. You get Texas in the non-con on the road. That's going to be difficult, of course. Of course, UT looking for revenge there. After you beat them last year, you get Indiana on the road. You have to go to USC, to one of the former Pac-12 teams to get Oregon at home. So, there's some games there that are going to be tough, no doubt. I mean, Michigan with new coaching staff, could they be a lot better? It's not running the, it's not longer the Sherome War circus. You have to go to Nebraska. So there's some stuff there that are concerning, but the talent there, the sort of the roster retention, the new coaching staff additions, even with getting Arthur Smith. Look, I have my qualms with him for sure, right? I do have some concern there. And not to mention, of course, you're losing guys like Brian Hartline and some other assistant coaches who've been on the move. Even with all of that, I trust Ryan Day. I trust him to get the job done, to at least be a consistent title contender. I think he's been there long enough to garner that consistency, or at least that consistent praise and that hope. Again, I think the roster's built pretty well. They still have Jeremiah Smith. They are still going to be a very, 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 very formidable team. And I think a national title or playoff appearance, anything short than that, yeah, that's disappointing for sure. I don't disagree with that. And I think reasonably to expect a national title appearance or a deep playoff run, that's fair. Yeah, and I think folks over there in Columbus, especially after winning it a couple of years ago, they get that. They totally understand it. Even before they understood that. You didn't see the results yet. Again, it's the classic cannot versus have not. So I know it's very, very short, reasonable expectations here, but Jeremiah Smith being a Blitnikoff Award winner, that's up there, having a very good offensive line, defensive line, having good quarterback play as usual. But that's all you should expect there. And I think anything less than that is not normal for sure. I think normalcy for them is 12 wins, 10 wins at the very minimum. As they definitely expected there. So Ohio State, reasonable expectations, playoff run, national title appearance, definitely in the cards there for sure. All right, last up here, college football what ifs. We're doing this much like the reasonable expectations, just kind of going back in the college football history and sort of saying, what if you change one thing in college football history, what ends up happening? Right, got 3 of them here. First one here, what if Tua Tagovailoa wasn't replaced by Jalen Hurts in the 2018 SEC championship game? Of course, that was the infamous title game, SEC title game, where Bama was behind. They were losing to Georgia. Bama comes back under Jalen Hurts when Tua was both benched and, he was benched for both health reasons and poor play. But what if Nick Saban didn't do that? What if Nick Saban didn't have this whole, the whole short leash mentality and just say, you know what, let Tua play it out. We'll see what happens, right? Because, he was the starter for all that year. It's interesting, right? If they don't replace him with Jalen Hurts, do they still win that game? I don't know. I mean, again, given what we know of Georgia and their Bama problem, I really don't know. It's kind of weird to say this, but I just don't know if the results are really going to change or not. Like, who's to say if Tua, if he starts heating up and Georgia starts to get the psychological thing going where it's like, we're up on Bama, but I don't know, man. I don't know, bro. So that one, I don't know. I mean, Bama probably still loses, but I'm not sure. And of course, if they do lose, Georgia is still, they move on to the to the cultural playoffs, and that's the only change there really in terms of the playoff structure. Just you just lose Bama and place them to Georgia. But then what happens afterwards, right? Does Georgia, face Clemson and they win the national championship, and instead of, of course, I'll assume they probably beat Oklahoma. They go to the national championship, and they probably still do play Clemson. Is the result different? Is it a closer game that they still lose? I don't know. I think Clemson probably still wins, and I think, Georgia, again, probably wins the SEC championship game. They probably still hang on. But even then, it's like, I don't know. Like, what if, Tua's still the quarterback? And again, Georgia, with their Bama problem, the psychological thing comes into play. They end up collapsing still, and, they still win the game. I don't know. I mean, that's definitely a possibility, too. So that's a very, very fun one there to look at in terms of not just one alternate possibility, but multiple branches, right? If we're going to do the whole branch theory and the timelines and stuff. Next one here. What if Kyler Murray or Kyle Allen did not leave Texas A&M after 2015? This is a fun one. I mean, back in the day, if you guys don't remember this, 10 years ago now, it's crazy. Kyler Murray and Kyle Allen both were 5-star recruits. Obviously, Kyler was more of a dual threat guy. Kyle Allen more of a, and I wouldn't say he's a total pocket passer, definitely more of a field general. He could run a little bit. But obviously, Kyler was more of the athlete. Both of these guys were on A&M's roster. I believe in 2015, both of these guys played intermittently. It's like you have Kyle Allen for a few series. You bring in Kyler to run the football on the goal line. Very, very interesting tactic there. But, and of course, now, Kyle Allen was there a long time. Or he was there longer. He was there in 2014. And everyone remembers when they beat Auburn in 2014. It was the Auburn Post 2013 when they were trying to get to the college football playoff and losing to A&M. So yeah, I mean, they were both there at the same time, and this is again it's crazy pre-transfer portals. Obviously, this would not be a thing in modern college football unless I guess the only place you can see this is what in the college football video game. If you turn off the transfer portal, which obviously life is not a video game, it's as far as we know. Sarcasm there, but yeah, I mean, this would not happen in today's college football. This would not be a thing. Having two of these former 5-star guys on your roster. Now, of course, they both ended up leaving and transferring out. And, of course, back then when you transferred out, unless you're a grad transfer, you had to, miss years, you had to wait. Obviously now it's, you just up and leave and go start now. So what if it didn't happen? What if they actually did not leave? Would it change anything for A&M? To be honest, I don't know. I mean, if Kevin Sumlin's still your coach, obviously, I mean, who knows? But I would just say if both of them, or at least even one of them, let's just say Kyle Allen leaves and they keep Kyler around, right? Does A&M make a playoff run? Because I believe at this time did have Myles Garrett, right? He was still at A&M. He hadn't graduated. I believe this was, so 2015 was his sophomore year, and in 2016 was his junior year, and he goes to the Browns in the NFL. So, yeah, I mean, you have Kyler Murray and Myles Garrett on defense. You potentially load up on recruiting. I mean, who knows? Maybe A&M makes a playoff run in 2016, right? Which they almost did, by the way, with what's his name? The guy who transferred from Oklahoma. I forget the guy's name. It's look this up actually, because why not? It's Texas A&M. What's the name? Comes to me later. It's just found it. Trevor Knight. Yeah. So they bring in Trevor Knight. If you don't remember, A&M in 2016, they were like what the fourth or third ranked team in the playoff rankings in the first week. Like they were like one lost team, lost to Bama in a very somewhat competitive game. They beat Tennessee when Tennessee had like Josh Dobbs and Alvin Kamara and all that. All those guys were there. So yeah, that A&M team in 2016 for a little bit looked like they were going to be sort of what last year's A&M team was going to be, like a playoff team. They were probably going to make it. And then they, of course, under Kevin Sumlin, they had their ceremonial collapse every single year. So I don't know. I mean, I guess yeah. I mean, if things progressed, 2016 with Kyler being there and Myles Garrett being there, and you had all this decent talent there, who knows? Maybe A&M could have actually been a decent team, and Kevin Sullivan would have been fired when he did. And then, of course, you never hired Jimbo Fisher, right? So you don't get into that mess. But then, of course, you don't get Mike Elko. So there was a, that does get sacrificed potentially. But yeah, that's a fun one there. What if either one? Again, if I had to choose which one probably leaves, probably Kyle Allen. I think Kyler Murray, from just a athletic standpoint, his ability to be a dual threat quarterback, and his, even now in the NFL, I know it's sort of dwindled in terms of his appeal. It's still a very good, decent quarterback. He's not like crappy or anything like that. At least I don't think personally. I mean, look, I'm not even a Cardinals fan or now a Vikings fan. It's like, I just think he's a decent quarterback. He's not good. I mean, he's not like a great quarterback, or he's not elite, but he's fairly decent. Like, if it was like the Bucs starter this year, I'll be fine with it. And then finally here, this one's pretty deep. What if Jacksonville State beat Auburn in 2015? Well, we kind of already know what would have happened, right? Even without doing the speculation. So I think this came from Brandon Marcello at the time, right? He was with Auburn's 247 site. Now he's with 247 National, right? Big 247 CBS Sports. So when Brandon was there at the time, I believe he revealed this back in 2016 or 2018, actually. When I believe it's when Auburn lost to Tennessee, I believe. Because I believe at the time, that was the worst loss of the Malzahn era, losing to Tennessee under, I think that was the Jeremy Pruitt experiment, first year of that. So when Tennessee beat Auburn that year, I think Marcello in one of his reaction videos, I don't know if it's around anymore, I don't think it is. But I do remember this. I'm pretty sure that this happened. In that live reaction, it was on like Facebook Live or something like that. I don't think it was on YouTube. But Marcello, I think someone in the comments or somewhere or somehow it gets brought up that this is, of course, at the time was the worst loss in Auburn history under Malzahn, that like total Auburn history. But under Malzahn, that was the worst loss, Tennessee. But Marcello brings up that the closest example to that would have been Jacksonville State in 2015 if they actually pulled it off. And then Marcello said, look, if Auburn lost, and this is based on his reporting, Auburn officials, even during the game in 2015 when they were losing to them, because they were. And I remember watching this on TV when it was happening. Auburn was preparing a proposal to get Malzahn to be fired if they lost. Like, there would have been an interim coach. I think it would have been Will Muschamp be an interim. Yeah, there was already stuff going on behind the scenes of Auburn, the deep state of Auburn, right? So there were already things in motion, plans in place, contingencies. If Auburn lost to Jacksonville State, that Malzahn would have been fired. And this season, by the way, was already going off the rails anyway, because you had all this hype about Jeremy Johnson being the future of Auburn football. You have Will Muschamp coming in again, mind you, pre-transfer portal, so he couldn't bring all of his great recruits from Florida to join him. So, I mean, yeah, the whole season was very, very jarring to begin with. I mean, with the Louisville game, and kind of interesting there. You have Lamar Jackson there starting there. His first game was against Auburn, so fun fact there. But so yeah, I mean, we already know sort of what would have happened, right? If Jacksonville State, John Gross, the coach back then, Eli Jenkins, the quarterback. If they beat Auburn again, we know this for sure from Brandon Marcello. There were plans in place to get Malzahn fired. They would have announced it, I guess, the day after. So you would have had interim coach in place, probably Will Muschamp. You go for the rest of the season. Muschamp leaves. You have a new coaching search. And that is a whole other thing. Like, who Auburn would have got after? It would have been, I don't know who. Like, just go look at the big names back then. Would it have been, I'm trying to think. So 2015, like, I don't know, like Jimbo Fisher would have been on there probably. What's his name? The guy who was at Houston at the time. I forget he was considered for the LSU job too. Let's see, Houston 2015 fall. I believe it was Tom Herman. Yeah, so he would have been up there probably for Auburn if they fired Malzahn. So whatever. Herman. Ironically, another name too, Matt Rule. This is kind of strange. He was up too for the Auburn job at the time. So him, I think Justin Fuente would have been up there as well. I mean, it's kind of ironic they would have lost Auburn in the Liberty Bowl, or not the Liberty Bowl, Birmingham Bowl. But yeah, so we would have had a lot of names. Like, yeah, Jimbo Fisher, Matt Rule, Tom Herman, a lot of G5 guys would have been listed on there. So yeah, I mean, that coaching staff back then, that would have been crazy. In an alternate universe, it wouldn't have happened. But thankfully for Auburn, they actually won the game, and Malzahn lived to fight another day. And of course, 5 years down the road, he wouldn't have fired anyway. So much like in 2020 when they fired Malzahn, then they went through this whole excursion of going through candidates and losing out on guys. Probably been the same thing. Probably been a very, very Auburn-esque, search. The deep state of Auburn getting involved and a lot of weird, wacky stuff going on. So if they lost Jacksonville State again, based on official information, there were plans in place even during the game. They were being drafted to get Malzahn fired after that Sunday to relieve him, to say I don't know how it would have been. I don't think, like Marcelo said, whether it would have been just a resignation or an actual firing. I would assume probably a firing. Sort of kind of in a way what happened, or what almost happened, I believe, to Lloyd Carr to Michigan back in 2007. So, and by the way, too, Auburn was, top 10 team at the beginning of the year, too. This would have been, if they lost, a very historical upset. So, yeah, that's what have happened there. And ironically, there was actually some evidence as to what would have happened here if Auburn would have actually lost this game, based on, again, what Brandon Marcello revealed years later what was actually going on. So, yeah, that's an interesting what if there. And actual one, we have some evidence to suggest what was happening. So that's it for the show. We are out of not out of time, but we're out of things to go over here, topics. So, of course, we'll have our extra pod tomorrow. We'll record it around this time tomorrow. We'll get it out to you guys on the podcast feed. Again, the schedule next week is going to be crazy. I'll let you guys know over the weekend what ends up happening with the schedules. So, tentatively, shows on Monday night, and we'll have one on Wednesday during the day, probably, I hope. Maybe. We'll see. If not, we'll just have to do them during the night. But anyway, that's it for the show. So again, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the stream videos when we do them. And that's it. Just, subscribe to the, podcast feed and follow us on the socials. So until next week, I'll let you guys know what the plan is. Until then, take care. And again, we'll have our extra pod tomorrow out for you guys on Spotify. So until then, take care, and we'll see you guys on the next